The use of forced and trafficked labor in China and too many other places around the world ranks as one of the worst abuses of basic human rights. We have a moral obligation to stamp out these despicable violations and to protect workers regardless of where they are in the world. This is about our values, but it's also about consequences here at home. American consumers are unwittingly buying products made with forced labor at their local clothing stores. American workers are being placed in the impossible position of competing against forced labor and child labor. And big American corporations, which have spent decades moving jobs overseas, are taking advantage of forced labor to improve their profitability. Mr. Wrona, are corporations doing enough themselves to scrutinize their own supply chains for forced labor?
No, they absolutely are not.
Well, that pretty much answers it. So let's talk about what corporations are doing. Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola, companies that are as American as apple pie, are just a few of the brands that are suspected of relying on suppliers that use forced labor. And they have spent huge amounts of money and deployed armies of lawyers and lobbyists trying to water down legislation that would make them take more responsibility for their supply chains. So, Mr. Wrona, how do you reconcile these companies' actions with their strong public statements against forced labor? Do you, or let me ask it another way, do you think they're likely to take meaningful steps to clean up their supply chains voluntarily?
No, I don't think they will. That's why I believe the government has a role to protect American workers from forced labor. This topic was, my father brought this topic up when I was a teenager. We talk about it, and not a lot gets done about it. It needs to stop now.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your point about this has been going on for a long time, and it's just more talk. You know, there's a lot we need to do across government to end forced labor, and it starts with holding corporations that profit from forced labor accountable. And that means corporations should not be allowed to hide behind cheap talk or opaque audit processes. They need to show us that their supply chains are clean and to face meaningful consequences if they are not. We also need to pass meaningful anti-corruption legislation to prevent corporate lobbyists from sabotaging efforts to put our core values ahead of corporate profits. Under no circumstances should our supply chain support the repression of workers' rights overseas or undercut workers' rights and workers' economic security here at home. It is long past time that corporations are held to account for their complicity in forced labor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Senator Warren. You and I both saw that Mr. Wrona sets the all-time record for succinctness, and we have appreciated that.
And that's because there's no ambiguity on this point. As he said, we've been talking about that since we were all teenagers. We have understood this problem, and Mr. Wrona's ready to go on it.
Well stated.